Hey guys, welcome to lecture 8, section 8, which is classes and objects. So I would argue that this is probably the most important concept to know is how objects and classes work and what they are, how to use them, how to use them correctly, how to use them efficiently. If you plan on getting a job as a software engineer, this is very important. But really, any area of our industry is very object-oriented programming is heavily used. So I mean, algorithms are cool to know, and it's good to have an idea of them. And they're important if you want to work for one of the big tech companies like Google or Meta or I guess Netflix, right? Or Apple. Any of those companies, yeah, you need to know algorithms, but for your day-to-day work, the stuff that you're actually going to be doing on the job, this is where it's at. And the assignment, the random bear generator assignment, that assignment is very reflective of a problem you might have or encounter in the real world. So um, so yeah, so this is very important. Make sure you understand everything in this section, and yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go over is objects and what anonymous objects are. So an object can be anything. So don't worry about the code too much just yet, but look at what these objects are. Okay, there's a object called my first car, and there's another object called mom's car. Okay, so the point is, an object can be anything you want it to be. Um, you can, it's very reflective of the real world. And there's different types of principles and patterns that you have to follow for best practices, and you'll learn those as you advance in your career. But things like solid principles and object-oriented design patterns are are very important to know, and this is the foundation for that. So again, a lot of real-world programming, like on-the-job programming, is that it's real-world programming. It's things that you would program in real life. Like a car. How would you program a car? Well, here's an example. Like, take a look at this, my first car. Okay. This is what's called an anonymous object. Why is it called an anonymous object? Well, you will find out in the later videos, but for now, just understand that this is an object. Okay. And it is a car. It is my first car, actually, right? And my first car was a Honda Accord LX 1999 with the silver color, right? So you see how this is very indicative of the real world. And this is kind of how you this is how you create an anonymous object, right? It's called instantiation. You instantiate an object this way. So what you do is you always want to use the const keyword to declare it. Do not use let. That's just the best practice. So you want to use const. You want to give it a name. In this case, it's just my first car. Then we're going to have the equal sign. It's going to equal these curly braces, okay? Now, you don't have to, you can instantiate an empty object, like so, okay? So this is just a regular object. It's just with two curly braces, okay? And in JavaScript, that's just an anonymous object. It's just going to be an object. That's the same thing as using the new keyword. So um, new, it pretty much creates space in the computer for a new object. In this case, it's just object. And this is what all the other objects are made of. So almost everything is going to be an object. And we'll talk about that more later on in this section. So this is an empty object. And let's go ahead and print out this empty object and let's see what it looks like. So when we run this, when we console log my first car, you just get these curly braces. You see that? So then um, you can add properties to it, and that's what these are called. These are called properties, and you separate them by commas. So you see here, there's the make. and you have a colon here, followed right after. You want to have a little space, and then you have a string called Honda, and then comma, right? And then you have the model, etc. It's the same thing, and you can. These are called key value pairs. Okay, key value pairs. So that means one is a key to a value. This is very, very similar to how hash maps, maps, dictionaries, these are all three of these are the same thing. And just depending on the language, they call them differently. So in JavaScript, we have what's called maps. Okay, and I am going to put a link so you can read up on what maps are, and you could actually use maps for the assignment instead of objects if you really wanted to. But for the sake of consistency, my solution is going to have objects. Um, okay, so that's what these are. These are key value pairs. And again, they describe what my first car is. And it's, it has a make, it has a model, a trim, a year, and a color. And something to be conscious of, and you're going to see this when you see my mom's car, um, how you spell these matters. Okay. So when you create a property, that's what these are called. These are called properties on an object. When you create a property, the casing and the spelling of it is very, very important. So that make sure that you spell everything correctly and consistently. Um, anyway, so let's go ahead and run this, and let's see what my first car looks like now when we console log it. And there it is. Okay. Now this is called also, you'll learn something in web development called JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Okay, that's what this kind of is. So just something to keep in mind. So when you see it again in your life, when you see this, and you will see this, you'll kind of have a reference of what this means. Um, anyway, so this is the other way to create an object or an anonymous object. This is not commonly used to say new and then object with the two parentheses. The most common way to do it is just to use these two curly braces, which is much easier and shorter than having to write out all of this, right? So but this is just here for reference, so you are aware, and just in case you do see it. But this pattern of using the new keyword along with then the name of well, this is a class, which again, we're going to get into as well. And then the curly braces. This is a very tried and true pattern. You're going to see this in a lot of different languages. This is how you create new objects and in most other languages, okay? Um, of course, there's some discrepancies and every language has its own way of doing things in the end, but this is fairly common across the board. So just for awareness, so when you go into another programming course, if you see this, you'll know what it is. Okay, so this is another way to create an object. So we're creating the object and we are on the fly. You can do this in JavaScript and you can't do this in other languages, but you can on the fly create properties for these for this mom's car object. Okay, um, so here we have there's different ways to do this. Okay, so the first way and the most common way is momscar.make equals Jeep. Okay, so this is the most common way to do this. Okay, the other way to do this is using kind of like an array. Okay, you can do this with an array as well, and you can pretty much you can create properties like this as well. This is not the best way to do it because accessing them this way is fine. Okay, if you want to access a property using the brackets with the string of the property name is okay if you're accessing it, but to set it and create it is not a good idea. Why? Because if you need to change this model, let's say you want to rename it to whatever, anything. I don't know, call it name just for fun. Okay. Now what you would have to do is you have to go through every single one of these car objects that you created, and you would have to make this name, 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 name. And it would be a giant pain in the butt to do that. So it's better to do this. And usually what you can do is you can right click on this and you can do rename symbol. Um, in Repellent, it's something different, and I will show you guys that. But pretty much what you do is you highlight whatever you want to rename and you right click, and there'll be something that says rename symbol or something along those lines, and you'll see. And if you click on that, it'll let you rename it. And when you do that, it renames everything for you all at once. Okay. Now for this course, that's not a big deal because our code isn't huge. We don't have millions of lines of code, but if you can imagine, if you ever work for a company that has huge systems, right? That's a very, very helpful thing. And you don't have to sit there and look for all of the different areas of the code base that were renamed that you have to rename manually. You can just do it automatically. IDEs have that nowadays, so that's a very nice thing. Okay. Um, Again, this is the color for my mom's car. It was silver. It was a Jeep Cherokee. It was the base model. I don't remember the exact trim, but it was the base trim. It was a 2000. It was also silver. And I'm showing you this that just like in this object in my first car, the year is all capitalized, and you see here it printed out all capital. And if I ever want to access this again, this is how I would have to. This is how I'd have to type it in. So you can imagine if you want to access the year for this car and the year for this car, that would be kind of tricky because one is all uppercase, the other one's all lowercase. So you got to be really careful with that. Try to be consistent. So this is not a good thing to do. I'm just showing you that you have to be careful with this. That's the purpose of this. Okay. And again, this is the same thing. Color, capital C, lowercase o, capital L, lowercase o, capital. Who writes code this way, right? No one. So just color is fine. Here we'll go back and we'll make this year like a regular person would. Okay. So anyway, this is just multiple ways to do the same thing. And when we run this, we can see here. This is my mom's car, right? This is the Jeep Cherokee base. We have the year 2000, and it was silver. Okay. Um, so that's the very basics of it. I think it's fairly straightforward, but if you have questions, definitely let me know. You're going to need to know how to access these for the assignment. This is very important. This is a very critical part. Okay, so there's a hint for you. Okay, let's go through this other little part here. Okay, so the other part, again, this is just kind of recapping this. You can access, well, you know what, I'm actually going to need this code. So let's do that. Let's just comment out these console logs because we don't want them to pollute our, um, we don't want them to pollute our console logging. So, okay, so here we have, again, this is the same thing like as above, where you are just, you're accessing these properties. Accessing them in this way isn't a huge deal. You can do it, but it's more used for something like for what we're going to use it in our assignment. You can do this. It's a specific JavaScript thing. You don't see this in other languages. This is how you normally want to do it. Okay. But anyway, so you'll see the make for my first car and the make for my mom's car. So it's going to be Honda and it's going to be, oh, got to save it. There you go, Honda and Jeep. Okay. So this is just for awareness that you can't access properties. Properties are, again, they're just descriptions of what the object is. Okay. All right, so next, looping through objects. Okay, so looping through objects is very important. So there's two new loops you're going to learn. I mentioned this in the looping section when we learned about for loops and when we learned about while loops. Um, so there's different ways to do it, right? There's called a for in loop and a for of loop. Okay, we're going to go over the for in loop first. Okay, so the for in loop, um, it allows you to pretty much access these properties, okay? So here you're looping through all of this object properties, okay? So here we see, my first car and then the property. So every single property that is in my first car, which is going to be make, model, trim, year, and color, okay? And you're going to see this printed at console logged, okay? So that's what it's going to print out. Property is going to equal all of these, everything from make to color, and then this is how you access those, right? It's very similar to um, this, okay? And you're going to see my uh, my my first car property, which is going to be that property, is going to equal that, okay? So when we run this, there you go. So property equals make. So my first car make is Honda. My first car, and then the property here is model, is Accord. Trim is LX, year is 1999, and then the color is silver. Okay. So, and I'm gonna link this in the description, and you guys will have some additional examples in there using W3 Schools because they have a very, very good little tutorial on this if you guys need further explanation. Okay, so the last example for this specific um, anonymous object section is going to be looping through an array of objects using for of. Okay. Now here in my cars array, I put in my mom's car and my first car. Okay. And then here's how you do this. So you say for item. So this you want to typically use the const keyword because you usually won't manipulate these items. But anyway, you can use let in here as well if you want to. Same thing for the for in loop as well. You don't have to use const. You can use let. But I just use const because I'm not going to be changing it. So okay, all right. So for so the way this reads is for each car of the cars array, we're going to console log the car. Okay. So what's going to happen is we're going to console log my mom's car and my first car. Okay. When we run this. So I'm going to go ahead and run it in code. And here it is. So the first car is my mom's car. There's a Jeep Cherokee. And then this is my car, my first car that I ever had. Okay. So this is usually going to be an array. And you can do this with anything. This could be an array of numbers too. Um, you could be, let's say const num array. And we can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this will be num array. It doesn't matter. We can leave it as car. Who cares, right? So when you run this, see, there you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what it does is it goes through without you having to go, let I equal 0 while I is less than blah, blah. It just does it automatically for you. And this is very nice. It's very nice because you don't have to sit there and fiddle with the indexes. And it's a little cleaner too because you don't have to, access it using the I and it's a lot cleaner. So anyway, this is something that is very helpful. So is the for in loop. It's something to be aware of. Okay, so the next section, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what objects are and what primitives are. So the difference between them, because up until this point, we've primarily just worked with primitive values. And then I'm going to show you what the differences are between all of them and how they differ. Okay. All right.